Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the... Oh, man, I'm getting my podcast wrong. This is Mythic Cast. I'm your host, Spencer. This is what happens when you do too many podcasts, John. I'm not joined by Michaela today. I'm joined by our special Mythic guest, John Baker. John is a Jigglypuff main who loves to play aggressive decks. How's it going, John?
It's going pretty good. Sleeping on the competition everywhere now.
Yeah, ooh, I see how it is. Well, before we get into the mono white deck we want to talk about today with you, John, just want to quickly mention our new sponsor over at Grey Viking Games. Have you heard of Grey Viking Games, John?
No, but please tell me all about it.
Yeah, so Grey Viking Games is a place that sells arena codes. So if you have some sleeves that you've wanted that you that are not in the store right now, or if you don't go to pre-releases because there's a pandemic, and you want to get those little codes that have the 6 booster packs in them, to buy booster packs, or when draft comes back, like they did with War of the Spark, they'd sell those. You could just go buy them. They instantly email you the code to your email address, and you can redeem it in Arena. So they're super awesome. Use the code Mythic at checkout to support the show, and you will get 10% off your order using that code. The affiliate link will be in the show notes, and we just want to give a huge shout out to them, as well as our other sponsor over at Pure MTGO. If you're not an arena player, you're still grinding on that MTGO like John has been in Modern, then head on over to Pure MTGO, check out their articles, and then see their sponsor over at MTGO Traders, because they're dope. They're the best way to buy MTGO cards.
Cool.
Last two more housekeeping items, Sean. First of all, our Patreon is launched. Go over to patreon.com/mythicast. Check that out. We're looking for feedback on things that people want, but Michaela and I appreciate everybody who takes the time to just head on over. It's a great way to support the show. It goes directly to Michaela and I so that we can make the show better and make some awesome new stuff for everybody. The Discord event will be this Saturday. John, are you playing in that?
I'm not, because I'm not on your Discord, but I would love to join.
It's free. All you got to do is join the Discord. $250 cash prizes, sponsored by AE Designs. Come on in, standard. You can bash people's face in and win some cash.
All right. I'm in.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Also, we do monthly giveaways for both Mythic trophy decks in limited and constructed. If you want to get in all those giveaways, but that's not why you're here. The reason you're here is because you made Mythic, John, and I want to talk to you kind of about your journey. You're actually a returning guest. You, I believe you came on and talked about Red, White, Feather. Back in the day, back in the before times.
Back when Feather was good, yeah.
Well, I mean, back when we could go to Magic events.
Yeah.
But today we're going to talk about mono white, and I want to talk to you about, like, you actually sent me an interesting text that said that this is actually your first time making Mythic again since then. Is that because you've been playing too much Jigglypuff? Is that because you couldn't get a grasp on the metagame? Like, what do you think the difference was?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the first thing was when we started seeing some of the design problems that were coming with Throne of Eldraine, the far I was going away were like, I didn't really like playing Magic the way that like the top tier decks of the Eldraine formats were. Like, it was like Blue Green Food was the top deck before Oko got banned out, and then after that it was like Team of Reclamation, like that was a big one.
Sure, like the Fires decks, and then the
yeah. And I think like it was tough for me to like really get into a good mindset when I'm like playing those games, or I didn't really feel like I could like make many changes to the decks and feel like I had a lot of agency.
Sure.
So it was hard to like really commit myself to grinding, and I fell into a bad mindset, and it was just tough to ladder after that.
Yeah, you didn't even want to hit the play button.
Yeah.
So
I started,
what made you hit the play button this time? Like what brought you back into the into the grind?
I think after seeing Uro finally get pushed out of the format, non-red aggro decks looked a lot more viable. And I'd seen through some of the spoilers that Halvar looked really good during spoiler season. And then Usher the Fallen was like, boy, you ever have a card speak to you? Card spoke to me.
Do you like 2/1s that make 1/1s?
I do. I like 2-mana 2/2s that make 2/2s. Do you remember Precinct Captain?
Hey man,
That card was baller.
I'm all, to be fair, I'm all about Usher the Fallen. I think that the card is really what white aggressive decks needed in a lot of different ways. It gives you a way to continually pressure your opponent without having to commit to the board too much, especially in a world where the decks are not that aggressive in this format outside of mono red and mono white. So
Yeah.
well, let's talk about the journey. Let's right now you're Mythic. What do you know what your rank is?
Last time I checked, I was rank 1270.
Okay.
I just kind of decayed for a couple of days.
Nice. So you're still in the hunt for that invite. What do you think the biggest takeaway was as you ranked up with mono white?
So I saw a lot of decks where they would kind of try to set up this game plan of play creatures, interact for the first 3 turns, and then on turn 4, that was kind of the inflection point where they would try to get an engine going. For Gruul, it was like the Great Henge. For a lot of the Showdown decks, it was Showdown of the Scouts. And then even with like Rogues, like they're really hoping that they can cast Into the Story on turn 4. And I did a majority of my climb from bronze to about like diamond 4 with Red White Showdown. And I was having a lot of problems because I would have these like first 3 like pretty aggressive turns, and then I kind of take a turn off, like either trying to cast Showdown of the Scalds or just having these like kind of middling development turns where my opponent would just like drop a big card advantage engine and like start pulling away that way. And I really wanted to just like drive home the board advantage I had built up to that point. And I saw Ross Merriam's article on Star City Games about his mono white list, and he really advocated just maul the Skyclave on something on 3, Halvar on 4, and it's just like you're playing a Johnny Call of the Pride again.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been playing Boros before you sent me your list for this podcast. And one of the things that I hated about a lot of the Boros lists, I'm like, why are we only playing 3 Maul? Like this entire deck wants this card. I just don't understand. So I really feel that. I completely understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think the pressure turns is something really big. Is there anything that happened during the grind that you think made you a better player this time?
I think it was just me recognizing the inflection point of taking advantage of decks that were trying to set up on turn 4 with just more aggression. And I think it was a bit of a growth moment for me where, you kind of have this deck where like no individual card like really looks good by itself. But, you had a nice clean mana base, you got access to Faithless Haven, and then you just got to cast all your cards. And like a lot of these aggro decks, like if they get to curve out, your opponent basically needs to like draw perfect to really have a chance against that.
That makes sense. Before we get into the deck, right before we start talking about mono white in depth, did you pick this deck just because of your affinity for white decks, or was there something specifically that you thought about? I mean, you mentioned the article, but I'm kind of curious.
The big thing that I saw for me was that nobody was blocking in the air. So I saw kind of this opening where Maul could be really good, especially if you put it on like, a Season Howlblade or something. Like there weren't a lot of like flash flying or like flash reach blockers in this particular format. And you could win a lot of board stalls just by like flying over things instead of like trying to set up like maybe a questionable attack where you're trying to go through with Embercleave, like with what some of the model red decks are doing.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's actually pull up the deck. I'm going to read this for the listeners that are not watching on the YouTube channel. The list that you sent me has 4 Giant Killer, 4 Faithless Haven, 4 Usher the Fallen, 4 Luminarch Aspirant, 4 Season Hollowblade, 2 oh my gosh, I cannot read this name.
I think it's Raidene.
Raidene, God of the Worthy. That is the 3-drop that it flips into a 4-drop for those at home. We have 4 Skyclave Apparition, 4 Halvar, God of Battle, 2 Tiberi Takedown, 4 Maul the Skyclave, 2 Sentinel's Eyes, 4 Faithless Haven, and 18 Snow-Covered Plains. So one of my requirements in this format is if I play a deck, it has to dumpster on rogues, by the way. I just want to get out of the way that this does, in fact, dumpster on rogues. So if you hate rogues, this is a great deck to play. Just want to get that out of the way. How do you win with this deck? Like, what's the main way this deck is winning?
The main plan of the deck is to put Maul the Skyclave on either a sticky threat or a threat that you make sticky with one of your 1-mana protection spells, and then you can clear a path with Giant Killer and Skyclave Apparition. And you're mostly looking to just hit him in the air or punish your opponent for making attacks that leave them with 1 blocker back with tapping it down with Giant Killer or moving it out of the way with Skyclave.
So if we were to go over kind of key cards in this deck, would you say that the key cards are... I mean, I'm gonna actually rank these for you. Number 1, Season Hollowblade. Number 2, Maul. And number 3, Faithless Haven.
I have 3 different cards picked. I think the 3 cards that you named are all very important to the plan, though, and I think they're like good at kind of establishing like your average game.
Sure.
I think the cards that I found to be key cards, just to like distinguish it from something like Red White Showdown.
Sure.
I found were Halvar, Faithless Haven, and then Sentinel's Eyes.
Yeah, let's actually talk about the Sentinel's Eyes, because I saw this in your list. I was like, I don't get it. And then I played with the deck. I was like, oh my gosh, this card is actually insane in this deck.
Mm-hmm. I think the 2 things that it's doing really well is that it's just a cheap enchantment to make Halvar more relevant in more situations. And then also, because it has Escape, it's using a resource that the deck doesn't often use, which is its own graveyard. And because it's not competing with other graveyard cards, you basically always have access to it.
Yeah, it pitches to free for the Hollowblade, and it is like chef's kiss.
Yep. Like, I don't. Were you playing Mono White in like Shadows over Innistrad Standard? Maybe
a little bit. I don't remember quite clearly enough.
Like, this card really reminds me of Griffspoon, if you've ever played it.
Oh, sure. I played with the Griffspoon before.
Yeah. Just something cheap, something that makes your creatures a little harder to block, and having Recursion out of the graveyard makes it so good.
Talk to the listeners a little bit about Halvar, because when I saw this card, I thought it was bad. I was like, why are we playing this card? And it has quickly become like one of the best cards in the deck, in my mind.
So the thing with Halvar is that he doesn't read very good. Like, I think he was one of the first guys that was spoiled, and I remember being very unimpressed with him because he was a god that wasn't indestructible. I was like, oh wow, White takes 1 for the team again. But when you actually play with Halvar, the 2 things that become really surprising are, 1, getting to move equipment from creature to creature, and like getting a feeling of like how good Double Strike can be. Like, you really feel it when you have Halvar, and then just any good enchantment or equipment. And then also the fact that when you play him on 4 and you have an equipment setup, because it moves around equipment every combat as opposed to just your combat, Halvar in turn 4 also becomes a very, very good blocker.
Yeah, moving it, you just have this 6/6 first strike.
Yeah,
monstrosity, or 5/5 double strike monstrosity, depending on things. I agree.
Yep.
Going back to the deck, you mentioned Faithless Haven. I mean, Scald decks and Mono Red get Faithless Haven. What makes Faithless Haven good in this deck?
I think the two things that make it very good are the fact that it has vigilance and the fact that we're not weighing it down by playing non-snow lands. I think the red white and like some of the 2-color aggro decks that are trying to play Faceless Haven have this choice of like, oh, I have to either play the come into play tap snow duels, or I have to play untapped basics and I might not always be able to activate it. In our deck, often it's like the biggest creature that you have access to for the fewest mana. You get to play it through Wraths, and then the biggest thing that I have found with it is that you get to attack with it untapped because it has vigilance. So there will be a lot of turns where you can pay 3 mana to activate it, swing in with it, and then before it blocks, you can tap it for like a good Kabira takedown or a Giant Killer activation, and you kind of get to like sneak it through when your opponent might not have been able to see that coming otherwise.
Yeah, I've definitely done both those things, along with just like post-combat playing a Luminarch or, whatever. Yeah. Let's talk about the sideboard really quick. I'll read the sideboard cards for those at home. We have 2 Fight as 1, 3 Darmath Magistrate, 3 Glass Casket, 2 Heliod's Intervention, 1 more of the Redain, 2 Elspeth Sun's Nemesis, and 2 Glorious Protectors. Talk to me about this sideboard. Like, what are you bringing in versus the other aggressive decks, for example?
I'm gonna preface this right now. I made the sideboard. I put in the 4-drops because I thought they would be good, and then they were never good. So he's gonna play this deck. Like, have a really, really good idea of what you want those 4-drops for. Otherwise, they're just never gonna come in.
I have played the Elspeths. It's funny that you say that. I was texting my best friend Matthew Kling, and I was playing this deck. I was like, you tricked me so hard when we were on Constructor Criticism together, because you convinced me that Elspeth was going to be like actually busted, and I don't even know that this card is remotely playable. And then 2 minutes later, I texted him. I said, right after I text you that, she single-handedly just won me this game. So I don't know if I'm wrong or not, but but I did in fact single-handedly win a game from Elspeth. The other 4-drop has just been good because, Flash against Flash is pretty good.
Right. So talking about other aggro decks, the general plan is going to be, you're definitely going to want the Glass Caskets because you want access to more cheap removal. You might want the Fight as ones. A lot of that is going to come down to whether like you can create an advantageous block with against mono red. Otherwise, you're probably going to be looking towards Heliod's Interventions or one of the 4-drops to try and like help you lock down the battlefield until you can find Maul the Skyclave and Halvar. And then you're probably taking out Usher of the Fallen because it doesn't really want to compete against other creature decks just because it's a 2/1 that like is difficult to attack into. And then Giant Killer may or may not come out if Chop Down doesn't have any good targets. And then, if you're cool pitching stuff to Season Howlblade blocks, like sometimes that's an option too. But man, I've got to tell you, I always have a hard time struggling telling people how to sideboard because I'm very like, I feel like I've internalized a lot of my stuff. And like when people ask me like, oh, why'd you do this thing? I was like, I don't know, it felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, let's kind of go over some of the, I thought your answers were great, by the way, for what it's worth. Oh. Talk to me about the mid-range decks. I mean, the thing is with mid-range style decks in this format, you've got different flavors of Gruul, right? Whether it's the Naya deck, whether it's the Gruul deck, or whether it's the mono green deck, they're all on this spectrum of aggressive mid-range decks. So does that influence, obviously you're probably bringing in Glass Caskets against those decks too, so that you can deal with Lovestruck Beast because it's, the size of a truck. Do you find that yourself bringing in things like Heliod's intervention against Gruul to deal with both the oh my gosh, I'm literally the Great Henge and the Embercleave?
Yeah, you definitely want to like be able to deal with those cards because often what happens is like they have to set up before those cards are good, and then they usually need a full turn cycle before they get full value out of it. You know, unless they like Embercleave you and kill you.
Sure.
The thing that I've really found with those matchups is they're all relying on expensive non-creature spells to like turn their advantage, and Redain actually does a lot of work against those decks while also being a flying vigilance creature that can fly over clogged board states. Against Naya specifically, because they need to cast spells from not their hands, Janeth Magistrate will often come in not only as a good blocker against their one drops, but also may put them in a situation where if they tapped out for Showdown and you get to play Janeth the next turn, not only are there adventure creatures stranded in exile, but also like they might have time walked themselves by trying to cast that Showdown that turn.
You may be ashamed of your sideboarding, but I literally couldn't figure out what this card was for, and I just realized that it stops Adventure and Showdown as you were talking, and now I feel like a dum-dum.
It's cool.
So, I think that, you know, sideboards are sideboards, right? Like, people are going to adjust for what they think the metagame is going to look like anyway. I think you've given a pretty good idea of kind of what you're trying to do with this deck. I want to talk to you about some cards that maybe I want to ask if you've considered them. We actually talked about one of them before the show, and oh my gosh, I already forgot the name of the card again. The 1-mana 1/1.
Oh, I'll say it of Life's Bounty.
Yeah, talk to me about that card because I know that Abe Corrigan posted a list that had 4 of that card, as well as like Luris in the sideboard, and I've actually been trying quite a few of those. Luris in the sideboard, stuff like that, and I've been really happy, especially in the mirror. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to play the mirror a lot, but man, giving your creatures and the pro white card. We should actually talk about that during sideboarding too, if you have found an answer for that card.
All right, so starting with Alcaides of Life's Bounty, I think just in a vacuum, I think it's very appealing because 1-mana 1/1 lifelink. It just carries counters really well with Luminarch Aspirant, and then carries a mace really well. And I think the thing that it's doing better than Selfless Savior, even though it costs mana, is because you're doing protection from a color as opposed to just like blank indestructible. If your opponent gets kind of like tricky with the kind of removal they're playing, you're not going to get punked out by that. And I think a good example, like 2 good examples, are like hostage effects with like Low Mage's Dominion out of Rogues, or like the Akron War, or Claim the Firstborn out of Red Black Midrange. You know, both of those decks are like really content sitting back, let you build up your one big creature and then take it before it kills them. And then I'll say it is like just a really good way to not let that happen. And then also because it's giving protection, you just have a different avenue of getting through a clogged board state. And then, you know, when you mentioned Luris, you know, you kind of, it's not like quite a lock, but sometimes you'll set up these situations where you can always just like have that protection spell kind of like in your back pocket, and then it's coming out basically always. So your Luris becomes like very difficult to remove. I haven't played with it, but I've played against it, and it has felt basically hopeless once they got it set up.
Yeah, the list that Abe had posted on Twitter had all 8 of the saviors and the stuff, and I've been playing 6 to 7 between them, but I agree that it's quite good. Talk to me about the mono white card though, man. Like the pro white. I cannot beat this card. Like, people play it. I mean, I've beaten it 1 time out of like the 5 times it's been played. I'm just like, you gotta beat that. You gotta get them to a really low life total before they get to 4, or you gotta like hope they don't draw
I saw that card. I was like, man, I'm never gonna get away from Archangel Ties. So for the viewers who didn't draft Eldraine, I'm gonna see if I can do this card from memory. The card we're talking about, it's 3 and a white for 3/2 protection from white as flying, and it says creatures your opponents control can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless your opponent pays 1 mana for each attacker. Is that close?
I don't know that it has that attack clause. I think that card would be way better if it did.
Oh man, I gotta. Hey, Ad, we have to put this brakes on this entire podcast so I can look up one sideboard card. But yeah, it's like it kind of blows my mind that card is in the same cycle as like Mystical Dispute and Veil of Summer.
Oh, is that what it's from?
Yeah, it's from Eldraine.
Oh. I'm pulling it up right now. 4 power, 3.
Yep, Archon of Absolution. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 mana for each of those creatures. Flying pro white.
Yeah, I just didn't. That's the thing, dude. I just never beat it, so I just didn't even realize what I was paying for.
I get that is basically the definition of a mirror breaker. Off the top, the only thing that's really gonna be worried about is like maybe you can offer up a trade with Faithless Haven, but like you have to pay 3 mana for that, and then you have to pay.
Luckily, it taps itself to. Oh no, that doesn't work. Does it?
Yeah,
it does.
Does it? Because oh man, I don't know.
I don't know if it works either. Either way, this card, the first time that my opponent played this card, it was actually out of the Naya deck in game 2. And I was like, what in the world is this? And I lost. Ended up winning the match in game 3, but I was like, that was rough. And then the next round, I played the mirror, and they played. I was like, I can't beat this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you really need to like meta to the point where like you need to beat the mirror breaker.
Sure.
Or just like have more of your own. But man, I saw that. It just made me so happy that like white decks were so good that people needed to play that.
Fair enough. I mean, it does speak to the strength of the deck, but I wanted to call out to make sure that the listeners know that it exists. What decks do you want to play against with this deck the most?
Definitely want to play against rogues. Feel pretty good against blue-red mid-range. Honestly, I feel really good against all of the adventure variants. Like Naya is probably the scariest because they can combo you out of nowhere. But if your opponent's gonna like tap out for a showdown or like a love star feast,
when you say combo, do you mean double their guy's power and fling it?
Yeah.
So that happened. I saw that for the first time today on Arena, and I was like, "What is happening?" And it was funny because he doubled the guy's power and attacked into my reach creature and then conceded. And I was like, that was awkward. Yeah. But
I gotta be honest. I know we're on a podcast, but I'm on a wait. That deck is so beautiful.
Well,
they play like their flings like get to be mountains that like help them cast their spells, and then late in games they get to pick up the fling with Shepherd of the Flock and then use it.
That's sweet.
Like, I cut my teeth on like brave Naya decks that were doing like Boros Charm and Goreclan Rainmaker, and I see this.
Oh, that's a good time.
Oh, good for you.
Bring back Brave the Elements. That is a.
I could talk for an hour about why Brave the Elements should just be like an evergreen card, but yeah, we're just looking for like big silly creature decks where they're trying to play efficient threats, and we're either killing them with Giant Killer or we're developing our battlefield with Skyclave Apparition.
Is there matchups you don't want to face?
I think the big one off the top is Mono Red can be close, and then there are draws out of the red-black mid-range deck that actually feel unwinnable.
Do you feel like you have a plan for that red-black deck, or you just kind of... I mean, it's not as popular as it was 2 weeks ago, so maybe it doesn't really matter, but...
I think the plan is like you just have to be as aggressive as possible, stick to plan A, and don't let yourself be punked by a Crowan War or Claim the Firstborn. And I think like playing Alseid of Life's Bounty is like definitely a good step towards that.
Awesome. We well, I guess we have one question from listeners, but I want to ask you: are you going to continue to play this deck? I know that you said you just jumped back on it, so I'm curious.
I definitely will. I think there are adjustments that the deck can make that seem kind of embarrassing or questionable at first glance, but you kind of get to like gear yourself towards beating whatever you want because there's so many like powerful incidental sideboard cards. And I think what you're going to see moving forward, at least for me, is that more Raidenays are going to move into the main deck. And then I think Dranith Magistrate and Archon of Mary are going to start sneaking in too. Because both of those cards make it very hard for Sultai Ultimatum decks to catch up with Emergent Ultimatum. And then maybe we'll start seeing the numbers go down on Giant Killer and Skyclave Apparition as the adventure decks kind of phase out. I'm sorry, you might have heard my dog crying.
That's okay.
He cries when he has a very good dinner.
It's a good pupper.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
So the only question we got from listeners is why did you pick this deck over Boros, and should they make the switch?
The big reason I picked the deck was instead of having these longer mid games where you set up card advantage and try to bury your opponent, you just kill them. You're so good at clearing a path for your creatures, and you're playing Maul the Skyclave, which in my opinion is like the second best equipment right now behind Embercleave, and even then I think it's close.
I think it's better right now for what it's worth. But I digress.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, John, thanks for coming back, man. I loved having you last time. I love having you this time. You've got a smile that lights up the YouTube channel, and I love having you here. Where can people find you if they want to talk to you about this deck?
They can find me on Twitter at intrepid_guard. And that's it, because I don't make content like you do. And I really thank you for having me on and making content that I can absorb.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. If you want to be a Mythic cast, there is actually a new way to do it for what it's worth as of this week. And there will be more information to come when I have Michaela on. But just tweet your Mythic deck and then either at the podcast or tweet it with #ReadyForBattle. As we want to help people get ready for battle as they prepare for their their Mythic runs and their SCG events and stuff like that. More information to come on that. T-shirts to come. We're excited to kind of launch this campaign to help people improve at Magic. So don't forget to check out the rest of the CCMTG network, whether it's constructive criticism, drafting archetypes with Sam Black. That podcast is so good. I don't know if you listen to it, John, if you're a limited player, but oh my gosh.
I'm not a limited player, but I should be, and I will probably listen to them.
It is too good. It is too good. You can find me at Spencer H. You can find Michaela at Mythic Michaela. Don't forget to check out her stream. We miss you, Michaela. Hope to see you next week. And thanks again, John. If you want to help the show, don't forget to check out the Patreon, but also like, subscribe, review, share it with a friend. Those are the best way to help the show. John, I hope that you can at least get a couple flings in tonight to make yourself happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.